We have the chair of the ICPAK Public Finance Committee, that is Robert Waruiru, in studio with us, talking about this debate. And it was stemming from Peter Wanyama, who is one of the LSK presidential hopefuls, saying, mkinipei kiti, only lawyers will represent you at tax tribunals. Before we even get into anything else, let's start with the quote of the day. Robert, good morning.
Good morning.
Janet will share the quote of the day with you. She'll let you know. If it speaks to you, you can say yes. If it doesn't, you can also say no.
And imagine we'll just move along. She says,
That's fine.
I don't, Anne Frank is the person behind the quote today. She was a Holocaust victim. She once said, how wonderful it is that nobody needs to wait a single moment before starting to improve the world.
Indeed, it's our obligation. It's our obligation to improve the world. I agree that.
So what do you think stops people from choosing to do good, even when the opportunity presents itself?
I think really it's human nature, Janet. If you think about it, it's always about me, me, me. But if we step back and say, what can I do for fellow mankind, or what can I do for mankind? I think then would definitely have a better society. Yeah.
Okay.
It's the motivation.
It's a motivation, self-preservation as well.
Why should I do
There's no
good?
incentive.
What do I get
Self-preservation as
from
well.
doing good?
Yeah, indeed. Okay.
Oh, okay. Now, I don't know, Jackson, if we have that clip from Monday's presidential debate with the Law Society of Kenya candidates, where Peter Wanyama, in one of his, actually, the candidates there were speaking about several things.
True.
About preservation of rule of law and order as president of the Law Society of Kenya, leading the Law Society of Kenya, also looking at the welfare of the legal profession, from how do you promote the welfare for all lawyers, from junior lawyers to senior lawyers, how do you promote the profession itself, how do you protect the profession, and one of the things that, and the campaign conversations was that we are seeing encroachment of the legal space by non-practitioners of law, right? And we need to actually have a conversation around that. So there's a conversation around arbitration. Should arbitrators be lawyers? Then it goes into, when you go into these tribunals and you're being represented by somebody, should that person representing you be a lawyer or not? Peter Wanyama picked the particular example of the Tax Appeals Tribunal, which brings together two parties. One, a party is a citizen, and the other, the party would be the tax agency, Kenya Revenue Authority. Who represents whom in that? Should lawyers be the ones who represent the parties here? The law currently allows lawyers to present parties or an agent who is recognized as such by the Kenya Revenue Authority. But let's hear what Peter Wanyama said, and then Robert Waruiru, FCPA Robert Waruiru, can react to that.
We'll engage the Chief Justice that effective immediately, when I assume office as LSK President, no accountant will do advocacy at the Tax Appeals Tribunal. That work will be the reserve, we will reserve that work for practitioners. Let accountants be behind us when we do the advocacy, whispering to us the technical issues, but they can't take over our space.
Thoughts?
So first of all, thanks guys. First of all, I should say that these are my views as Robert, and I'm saying that because I'm both an accountant and an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. And when I should first of all start by saying those views have been expressed by presidential candidates. And you know, we can expect that presidential candidates will say all manner of things. and I think for me, the critical thing is, should any of them ascend to that office and that becomes an issue, then I think it's time to have that conversation. But for now, I think we just treat it as a campaign talk and you know, just look at that way. But also secondly, and Eric, you mentioned this, if you look at tax disputes, generally speaking, on the one hand, you've got Revenue Authority, and that's the respondent in all these cases. And then you've got the taxpayer who is saying, you guys are asking me for money, but I think I owe you nothing or I owe you less. Yeah. And that's where the dispute comes in.
I actually think you owe me.
Yeah, well, there could be that as well. Yeah. And so the issue then becomes who can appear before the Tax Appeals Tribunal. And under the Section 25 of that Tax Appeals Tribunal, under the Tax Appeals Tribunal Act, you can represent yourself as a taxpayer. And that's the first person who is who can appear before the tribunal. And then an agent can appear before the tribunal. And then thirdly, an advocate can appear before the tribunal. And one of the reasons why the law was structured that way is because if you think about dispute resolution, you're trying to make dispute resolution simpler for everybody. You don't want it to be too technical. You want it to be easily accessible by the masses. And that's the reason why actually tribunals exist, because you're trying to resolve disputes in an efficient manner, and that's actually one of the dictates of the Constitution. If you look at Article 47, fair administrative hearing, if you look at Article 50, you've got to access justice and have a fair hearing. And so what this tribunal does is that it tries to simplify the process, and that's why it's saying, as a taxpayer, Robert, you can actually appear yourself. Or if you think that you're not qualified to do that, or you're not happy to do that, then talk to an agent. Or if you're happy, talk to an advocate. So all three people can appear. And actually, when we can discuss this in a bit more detail, why I think that agents actually play a critical role in dispute resolution.
Who's an agent?
Who's an agent?
That's a good question. So now, under the law, you can apply to be licensed as an agent, as a tax agent, not just anybody, but as a tax agent. And part of the qualifications is that you have experience in finance, in law, you have been a revenue officer for an extended period of time. So basically, these requirements are saying we want somebody who can help us administer tax justice. That's the objective.
Okay. So is there any legal limitation? Okay, because I think what he's speaking to is, I guess, yes, there's the one hand is protecting lawyers. The other one is maybe this blurred line of legal knowledge vis-a-vis just the technical knowledge. So let's go back, because you've broken it down really well. But is there a case sometimes where, no, let's actually limit it to people who have the legal knowledge to air out the arguments and have the technical person side by side? Do you think there's an argument for that? Do you think there's limitations to not having the legal knowledge as well?
You're telling Bob now, this time, to speak to us as a lawyer, because he is. So the first answer was as an accountant. Now answer as a lawyer.
And guys, I actually think that instead of fighting about this space, what these professionals should do is come together and work together to deliver a solution to the taxpayer. Because as a taxpayer, what I want is KRA not hounding me. I want to go back to my business. That's it. That's what's most important. And so for me, I think the accountant, having been involved in the preparation of these books of accounts, understanding the business, advising the business, and even engaging in terms of the Revenue Authority audit, stands a better, or is in a better place to work together with the lawyer to deliver that solution that the taxpayer wants. So my view is that...
Sorry, Robert, that's too expensive.
Okay, to have both.
To have both.
No, and
you want me to have a lawyer and an accountant? I was considering self-representation already.
Or two in one, like him.
Or two in one.
You can get two in one. And by the way, there are so many accountants now who are lawyers. And so this is the reason why it's a bloodline. And so, Mariam, if you go to the High Court, because now as a tax agent, I can go to the High Court. As an advocate, I can go to the High Court. But still, there are some very technical issues that you need an accountant to advise you on, which is why I am advocating for these two professionals working together.
Okay,
You've not answered Jano's question. You've gone around it. You've become a lawyer.
He's lawyered.
You've lawyered the answer.
Lawyering up,
Yeah. Ask the question again, Jano, please, because that's what we're asking. Is there justification? Is there ground for what Wanyama is advocating? And many who are like him were saying, yes, you can come in as a technical person, as an accountant, but the person who actually represents this client, the person who is on record, is an advocate.
And I think there is merit in what Janet is saying. However, I'm saying that as a taxpayer who has a dispute, I am allowed to elect who is going to represent me. And if I feel that at the tribunal that a tax agent is better suited to represent me, maybe because they are closer to the facts, then certainly I'll work with that. However, when I go to the High Court, then I have a problem because it's only the advocate who can represent me.
We're at the tax tribunal. What documents are we referencing? As the Constitution, obviously, in some way or other, but what other, subsequent legislation and statutes are we referencing, and who is aware of them? You can see where I'm leading with this question.
Yes. And that's a very, very good question, actually. So remember, at the Tax Appeals Tribunal, the dispute is always between a taxpayer and the Revenue Authority. And so if you've got a dispute, what the law says is you write to the commissioner and say, I disagree with your tax assessment. And then the commissioner reviews that position and says, actually, I think we are still right. And so as a taxpayer, your first course of action is then to go to the Tax Appeals Tribunal, and that's provided for in law. And that's why I'm saying now that under the Tax Appeals Tribunal, you can decide, as Mariam, I'll go myself.
Yes.
And by the way, you can actually draft that documentation yourself. It's not that complex, because what the tribunal has done is that it has tried to simplify that access to justice. And so you'll say, this is why I disagree with the commissioner, and these are my documentation, or this is my evidence why I disagree with the commissioner. And then that tribunal, and we'll discuss the composition of the tribunal, that tribunal looks at it from a commercial perspective as well as a legal perspective. And that's part of the reason why the tribunal is made up of lawyers, of business people, of accountants, of people who've got experience in insurance, finance, and so on. So you're basically saying, I want people who can relate to the business world to help me interpret the law and come up with a fair decision as far as tax liability is concerned.
Okay. But, okay, the tribunal is made up of lawyers. Who else?
So you've got lawyers, you've got accountants, you've got people experienced in finance, insurance, and all manner of professions. It's basically...
Okay, everyone is represented.
Yes.
But on a typical panel at the tribunal, how many judges are sitting?
Good. So first of all, it's chairman of it's a chairman of a panel. So the tribunal says, the tribunal Tax Appeals Tribunal Act requires up to 20 members of the Tax Appeals Tribunal.
Okay.
Now, of those 20 members, at least 5 have to be lawyers, and up to 9. You cannot have more than 9 lawyers.
Okay.
And then that's where now these other professions come in, accountants and so on and so forth. Now, each panel is made up of between 4 and 5 members, but each panel has to be chaired by a lawyer. And there's a very good reason for that, because it's a procedural issue. You want the lawyer to be guiding and saying, this is how I think we should be taking the evidence, this is how I think we should consider this evidence, and so on. And then the other members of the tribunal would be accountants, journalists, even we've had people we've had doctors as well on that tribunal, people who are ex-Kenya Revenue Authority, especially for some of these technical issues. So the idea is, it's almost like the US system where you've got a jury. It's your peers hearing.
It's a jury of peers.
I've understood.
Let me read the law, actually, so you can just get it straight up. So the Tax Appeals Tribunal Act says that it shall have a chairperson and not less than 15, not more than 20 other members, of whom, like Bob has told us, at least 5, not less than 5, and not more than 9 shall be advocates. The chairperson is somebody who is qualified to be appointed as a judge of the High Court. Of course, the basic entry is advocate of the High Court, okay? Member has a degree in law, business, finance, public finance, economics, insurance, or related discipline from a university recognized in Kenya, or any other relevant qualification from an institution recognized in Kenya. So you just need to have a degree.
Yeah.
It can even be a degree in communication.
Even anthropology.
Even anthropology. Okay. So the others are just, of course, the other things. You have high moral standard, 10 years experience, is not a public officer or a tax agent, he has not at any time, been an employee of Kenya Revenue Authority in the last 5 years, and so on and so forth. So any other person can be, can sit here.
Exactly.
So then, nice thread. Now that we know who sits on this tax appeal tribunal, which disciplines they come from, when I'm going to court in the traditional sense, it is entirely like a matter of the judiciary. I am being represented by a lawyer. The person in front of me judging me is a lawyer. The matters are legal and it's plain as day. Here, clearly though, it's business. It's law meets business, meets tax, meets all of these. So does Peter Wanyama's, idea or hold any water, if we're being honest?
I think if we're being honest, no. I don't think it holds any water. and I think this is the reason why I'm advocating for almost a collaborative approach, because you can't have one without the other necessarily. And the reason I'm saying that, Mariam, is remember, this dispute is arising from your accounting records.
Yeah.
Now, who has prepared those accounting records?
An accountant.
Exactly. So it actually makes sense to have the person who's closest to these facts represent you at the tribunal. And you could even represent yourself, like we've said.
Yeah.
And remember, at the end of the day, the critical objective of these tribunals, actually, if you go to the history of tax dispute resolution in Kenya, it used to be very technical. We used to have things called local committees and VAT tribunal and excess tribunal. And it was difficult to figure out where you are going. And so in 2015, all this procedure was collapsed into one so that we have a simplified access to justice. That's the objective of tribunals.
What if somebody, okay, again, just going back to that argument, would accountants though have the kind of legal knowledge to handle litigation and procedures? Because that could be one argument is, do accountants have that kind of training?
That's a very good question, Janet. So first of all, when you talk about simplification of access to justice, that's the reason why even under the Tax Appeals Tribunal Act, the procedure for that you'd otherwise find in a court is excluded. And that's the reason why you as a taxpayer can actually represent yourself. We've gone to the tribunal and we've seen guys, a farmer coming in and with a kofia and saying, excuse me, judge, you can actually access that dispute resolution fora. And so to your question about whether you need specific legal knowledge, I don't think you do. What you need is an understanding of the facts, an understanding of the dispute, and just a basic capability of expressing yourself before the tribunal.
It's good that
because
you
it's not
mentioned that.
so it's not a court process per se. In court, if we went to the court, it's usually adversarial. It's you are here, you're accusing, and the other person is defending themselves, and so on. How are the proceedings conducted in a tax appeals tribunal? Like, walk us through it in a simplified manner, so we can see. I can understand that. I can see it's simplified. That I don't need a lawyer to come with Kiingereza kubwa.
Indeed. And by the way, just before I even answer that question, Eric, if you go to the history of these professions, lawyers started as orators in the Roman Empire. So Mariam has got a problem with Janet here, and she can't express herself, so she goes to her friend Latif, who has got Kiingereza kubwa, as you're saying.
I'm not happy.
Exactly. You have fallen.
Exactly. And then just like that. Yeah, exactly. So that's how it started, yeah. And so your question about how does it go in the tribunal? So the Revenue Authority is saying, Robert, you owe us 5 million shillings in VAT, and I'm saying I don't. So the first thing that I do is go to the tribunal and I say, I don't owe KRA because of 1, 2, 3 reasons. And generally those reasons will be 4 or 5 if you look at most pleadings of the 2,000 cases a year that are handled by the tribunal. Okay. And then you give your story. KRA came and audited me on this day. This is what I gave. This is what they said. This is where we have a dispute. And this is the law. And remember, by the way, this law is available for everybody to read, including taxpayers. And so once you go to the tribunal says, okay, Robert, you say KRA doesn't owe you. Prove to us that KRA doesn't owe you. And that's why now you present your documentation, your arguments, and so on. KRA will then be saying, actually, we think Robert owes us because of 1, 2, 3. So it's still adversarial, and that's because we are a Commonwealth country. It's a Commonwealth heritage system. But it's a very simplified way of taxpayers achieving the justice, the tax justice that they're looking after, they're looking out for. If we were to compare that with, let's say, the High Court, first of all, there's a dress code that you need to adhere to. There are certain procedures that you need to align or abide by. In the tribunal, very simple. Put in your paperwork, come and tell us your story. Period.
Okay. I love the simplicity. I'm thinking about the success rate, because something you said caught me earlier. When people represent themselves, it sounds nice in theory. It's like, okay, I can represent myself. But what's the success rate of self-representation at the tax tribunals versus advocates versus accountants being the only? Let's use, and I know it's hard to find data that's granular, but anecdotally, just from your 2 observations, what do you think?
Sometimes you go to the Tax Appeals Tribunal, and because I'm a business owner, I am so passionate about my business, I can explain to you the last cent And Revenue Authority has come to audit me, and I can tell you, by the way, I actually bought Mariam tea on this day, and I met her on this day. So I have seen instances where taxpayers have represented themselves and come out successfully. I've also seen instances where tax agents or lawyers have represented clients and not been successful. So it's a bit difficult, but I have to say, if you look at the tribunal decisions, they are basically 50-50. The revenue wins about half, taxpayers win about half. And that's the reason why then you have the avenue of appealing to the High Court and the Court of Appeal and so on.
Okay. You're a lawyer for real. Because I can't get, that's why I say, Nimgani, a higher success.
A higher success rate.
So here's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
The idea, which is a constitutional idea, that we make justice as easily accessible as possible, is what actually has led into the establishment of tribunals and other courts, like even going into the alternative justice system and so on and so forth. Just looking at the number of tribunals we have established by law, there are many of them. We have the Tax Dispute Tribunal, of course. We even have Business Premises Rent Tribunal, Rent Restriction Tribunal, Land Acquisition Tribunal, Capital Markets Tribunal, Public Procurement Administrative Review Board, the Insurance Appeals Tribunal. You've got the Political Parties Dispute Tribunal, Refugee Appeals Tribunal. You've got Medical Practitioners and Dentists Tribunal, Advocates Disciplinary Tribunal, Industrial Property Tribunal, many, Energy and Petroleum. So each sector sort of will have some way of dispute resolution that says you can start here before you go into the more serious, strenuous judicial process, right? That's the thinking of it.
Correct.
Robert, has it worked?
And actually, I think it has. And before I even answer your question, Latif, under the Fair Administrative Actions Act, you cannot jump dispute resolution levels. That means that if you've got a tax dispute, your first stop has to be at the Tax Appeals Tribunal before you then go to the High Court and to the Court of Appeal. And there's a very good reason for that, because you don't want to clog up the justice system. Right now, you're talking about over 11,000 cases in the High Court Commercial Division. Now, you're probably talking about maybe 16, 17 judges? So you're talking about a judge having about 1,000 cases. It's crazy.
It is.
And remember, people are still continuing to file these cases even today. I'm sure there will be more that will be filed. So the question you're asking, has it worked? Absolutely. In my view, the tribunal handles about 2,000 cases every year. That helps in unclogging these disputes massively. And not only just unclogging disputes, you want to unlock capital. Because when Revenue Authority has come and assessed me and we're in dispute, they've probably blocked my account. So I can't even trade. But if this dispute is resolved expeditiously, because actually if you look at the tribunal, on average, they'll take about 6 to 9 months to resolve a dispute. Quite fast by any comparison. I think the only other country which is faster than us probably is the UK. They'll do their cases in about 28 days. So definitely tribunals have assisted.
The only other country or the only other Commonwealth country?
Well, they are the only other Commonwealth country, I should say.
Because I think there's other people who are moving fast. Yeah, okay.
It's true. But if you think about the quantum of, you're talking about 2,000 cases being handled by 20 members of the tribunal.
Yeah.
Now, those are still many. And some of them, by they can be quite complex. So I actually think that tribunals have a very important role in unclogging the justice system and ensuring that people are able to access that justice timely.
We'll come back and continue the conversation. We're in studio with Robert Waruiru, who's Chair, ICPAK Public Finance Committee. We're talking about accountants versus lawyers in tax dispute tribunals. We'll also sample some of your feedback after the break. Right. We're just getting back into our conversation about accountants versus lawyers. It sounds so intense. And later you'll tell us, when you're saying they need to work together, what would it look like collaboratively? I don't know, in your opinion. But some feedback. Christian Mutiga says, advocate trainee here. Lawyers and advocates have benefited immensely from gatekeeping legal information and archaic technical procedures. We are due for a massive transition in our profession. Do you want to react to that?
Well, and actually, technology is really, in fact, they're calling it destructive reconstruction. Yeah, it's that bad. If you're not at the cutting edge of technology as a lawyer, or any profession for that matter, even accountants, then you actually stand to be irrelevant. And so if you think about the space we are in today, I can get all the laws of Kenya on my phone. I can get case law on my phone.
Yep.
Really, people have options now, and so you can no longer gatekeep. And this is the reason why, Janet, I keep on saying, work together. Yeah.
This gatekeeping, though, you can see where it's coming from. It's from, I've got to try and protect my turf so that I can have water flowing downstream. If I don't do that, then the guy upstream is going to block everything, right? So as an accountant and a lawyer, how do you see as the best way to preserve the profession for the professionals in it?
Yeah, so I think actually that issue of stopping the flow downstream is actually not correct, because if you think about the disputes, approximately 50% of those disputes then go up to the High Court. So there's absolutely no question about whether there'll be work for lawyers or not.
Okay.
That's not in doubt. Yeah? And sometimes, by the way, you go to the tribunal and the KRA loses a case, but on a question of principle, they will appeal. And so obviously there'll be space for the lawyers. How should we as professionals safeguard this space? I think what is more important is how we serve our clients. Yeah, and it doesn't matter what profession you profess. It's about, are you providing tangible value to your client? Because that's the only reason why we all go looking for services. If I don't feel that you're serving my need, then I don't need to engage you. Yeah, and so I actually think that that's probably what will help all professionals in the future.
True. Had we read the question from Mutiga about there's a time for a transition in our profession. This is Christian.
Oh, yeah, that's the one. That's the one when she said, Christian, he said that that the gatekeeping, it's the one.
Yes, it's the one. It is the one. Okay. No, when he says there's it's time for that massive transition in our profession, I'm thinking about what he's saying, which is it's very inclusive. But then the examples we were even talking about over the break, places where you don't need legal representation. So is there a legitimate threat here that Peter Wanyama is speaking to? That it starts like this, which is you can represent yourself or you can have an accountant represent you at a tribunal. Then it's people realize for civil matters, do I actually need a lawyer? Maybe I can also represent myself. Or my friend who's a really good orator, Eric Ambia Jano, Judge Jano.
Yeah. And then on top of all that, AI.
Boom.
Yeah.
Is there a legitimate cause for worry here?
I think for most professionals, there is certainly a legitimate cause for worry from an AI perspective. I mean, just like we were saying, in some countries, you no longer actually need lawyers to do draftings or to draft contracts even. Within 2 minutes, you've got your agreements drafted by AI. And so I understand where my fellow colleagues were coming from when they said that. However, it cannot be that by saying this is the preserve of we lawyers that you'll survive. No, actually, you could say that this is your preserve, and then technology comes and says, guys, you guys are cake. This is too bad. You're not. You can't operate. And so I don't think that there's cause for worry. What I think we should do as professionals is be ready to operate in the new world.
I like that.
Let me ask a question that is related to that, but now, in the Tax Appeals Tribunal, I can represent myself, I can get an advocate, or I can get an agent. And you told us an agent can apply to be licensed, somebody with finance experience, experience on revenue officers. So basically you're saying that an agent must be an accountant.
No, an agent doesn't have to be an accountant. Let me give you a very good example. A lot of people may not appreciate customs procedures, but when you import a car, for example, at the port and KRA you're haggling with KRA about the value and so on and so forth. A customs agent is very well versed with the procedure and the issues that arise from these taxes on importation. Now, a lawyer, or an accountant for that matter, may not be as well versed. And that's the reason why the law is saying, if you are a professional and can demonstrate, and you're there to be appointed as an agent or to be licensed as an agent, you actually go for an interview before a tax agents committee. And these guys vet your credibility, your competence, and so on. So that kind of a dispute is better represented by a customs clearing agent who has got experience and can tell you about all these, tariff classification disputes and so on and so forth. And so I actually think that you don't have to be an accountant to be a tax agent.
Okay.
Now, on the other side, so we can see lawyers, and I'm seeing like space is shrinking and more lawyers are getting into this space. In terms of accountants, how many accountants do you have in Kenya? And is their space also under threat?
Yeah, so let me start with the second one, which is the space under threat. Absolutely. I mean, if you think about the enterprise resource programs that people are using, accounting systems that people are using, whereas previously you needed maybe 3 or 4 accountants to do these roles, you only need one.
True.
And actually, you put in the data, the system crunches the data, boom, you've got your draft financial statements. And so all these professions, I think, are at a crossroads, and that's the reason why they need to reinvent themselves. But to answer your first question, how many accountants? We're probably about 40 or so thousand, and we have 26,000 or so lawyers.
That's quite a large number. Yeah, I can see how... Yeah, it's a problem again. And then plus now 20,000 advocates.
Yep.
But then again, the economy is growing, the nation is growing, so disputes will also grow in tandem. It's hopefully our capacity to handle them continues to grow as well. I'm thinking through how then accountants can perhaps protect themselves or future-proof themselves in tax dispute tribunals, but as a whole. So let me begin in this issue. If Peter Wanyama does get elected as, LSK president, he's told you one of his agendas is that no accountants here. How is there any way for accountants to protect themselves and future-proof themselves, not just with tax dispute tribunals, but in general?
So let's take your supposition about Peter becomes the president, the 52nd president of LSK, and he pursues this campaign pledge.
Yeah.
The first thing that I think would need to happen is that they would need to have a change in law. Because you see, currently, the law does provide for all these guys to represent.
It does.
And that change in law will then require public participation in compliance with Article 118. That means accountants, lawyers, business people, you and I, everybody,
all of us,
will be heard. And of course now Parliament in its wisdom will then determine which is the best way forward. I think for purposes of access to justice, it's probably going to remain as it is. Yeah.
So it's an empty campain promise?
No. I'm not saying it's an empty campaign promise. I mean, I don't know.
It's an uphill task.
Yeah, it's hard to deliver.
Not insurmountable.
There you go.
But a tough one.
Yes,
it's basically Everest without the gear.
Come on.
Even Everest with the gear would still be...
It's tough.
It's still challenging, yeah.
I want to ask an ethical question now, because we like to question professions here and what the professionals are doing to stay above board in terms of ethics. From the accounts perspective, accountants, auditors being accountants, there's this accusation that the accounts profession is actually a facilitator of corruption in this country. We talk about corruption and theft of public funds and all those, and you'll find there will be an accountant somewhere, somebody from the accounts profession somewhere. Either they'll have audited and given it a clean bill of health, or they'll have advised, or they'll have processed payment, and so on and so forth. Have you faced that accusation as an accountant's profession, and what has the response? You now, not as ICPAK, right? You as an accountant, how do you stand up for your profession?
Well, first of all, when you talk about a professional, it's somebody who professes. So you're professing a competence. And so from an accountancy perspective, you're saying, I can help account. And that's the reason why the public or general public is saying, guys, where are you when all this is happening? And I think that's a legitimate question, because on the one hand, you've got people who are responsible for ensuring that our resources are properly utilized and they are accounted for, hence accountants. And then on the other hand, you've got auditors or people who are looking at how these resources have been used, and they're saying, we think that this has not been used properly. And a very good example is the Office of the Auditor General. I mean, she's done a fantastic job. I think they've done a fantastic job in terms of calling out some of these things.
Yeah.
So I agree, Latif, that there's definitely a conversation to be had. However, I think there may be a few extenuating circumstances. One, we've had instances of people who are essentially forced to do some of these things. I know it's a question about threat to life. And you've had whistleblowers coming forward and saying that this has happened to me and I'm no longer going to accept it, and so on and so forth. So there's an element of probably undue pressure. Of course, there's an element of very high public expectation because of the role that you are playing. You know, you're supposed to be, let me use Janet's word, gatekeeper of these resources. You're supposed to be gatekeeping these resources. But also, I think as a country, we really must look at ourselves and say, there's a problem with corruption. Because when I'm stopped by a cop and I'm thinking, okay, do I give this guy 200 shillings or do I spend my entire day in court? That's a trade-off. And I like giving this example about my wife. My wife was stopped by a traffic cop, and that conversation started, and she said no. And she spent the next 9 months in court. Wow. Yes. And this guy was asking for 500 shillings. She paid her lawyer 30K to present her on that matter. And I think we really need people to step up to that kind of...
Yeah, that's standing on business.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's an unfortunate... I think even as you continue with that, I don't know whether I want to take us back a bit. The Advocates Act, and whether it also has... Because the expansion of rights has started, right? People being able to represent themselves. But is that in tandem with what's in the Act?
Well, yeah. And, you know, Janet, for any matter, you can actually represent yourself. The only thing that they say is that it actually makes better sense to have somebody speak on your behalf. And in fact, if you listen to the debate, even Peter Wanyama himself said that they act on instructions. That's why we say lawyers take instructions of their clients. And so under the law, you can actually represent yourself. And remember the point that we were making earlier on. If you look at the Constitution, the only constitutional preserve for lawyers is criminal matters, where the state is obliged to provide an attorney or a lawyer in a criminal matter. But otherwise, you can represent yourself.
And it doesn't dilute the legal profession.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Because sometimes economically you may not be able to represent, to hire a lawyer. And so you will still proceed. We've seen people who file their own pleadings, and they are guided by the court process. The judges are trying to dispense justice, as it were, and they'll get the entire process. So it doesn't. It
doesn't. Then you mentioned earlier that the solution to this is working side by side, which I think is already happening. Is there something more that you think, and I don't know whether you finished answering Mariam's question on future proofing, and I don't know whether it comes in then. So now, say, this, Peter Wanyama either becomes or doesn't become. Either way, the debate is happening. You've said the solution here is for both to work side by side. But some might argue it's already happening, but he wants to edge out the accountants. How would you then suggest it's done in a way that is undeniable, in a way that allows that collaborative effort to make sense? So for me, one of the reasons why I am still saying that these guys need to work together, we need to work together. If you look at some of these very technical issues, and I'll give you an example of IFRS 17 for insurance companies. That one you need coffee and probably something stronger than coffee for you to understand if you're not an accountant. And so this accountant has come up with these models which are being challenged by Revenue Authority from a Revenue Authority perspective. And then this dispute has gone to the Tax Appeals Tribunal. It only makes sense for the guy who came up with this financial model to come and explain it and explain why he's holding that position. And so this is the reason why I think from a future-proofing perspective, these two guys need to work together, because one of the biggest issues we have in the Tax Appeals Tribunal is that if you don't raise an issue at the Tax Appeals Tribunal, you cannot raise it on appeal. You see, and that's the reason why lawyers also come in, because then lawyers understand that, and so they can advise you as a taxpayer. You did not raise this as an issue in the first instance, so you cannot even bring it up now at the Tax Appeals Tribunal, at the High Court, and that's why these two guys, and I like saying the chairman of the Tax Appeals Tribunal, Emeritus Nyongesa, he kept on telling us, guys, you need to work together, because the lawyer understands the law and understands some of the what you call sharp practice tactics, the tactics that you would use in litigation. But then the accountant also understands the backstory. So these two guys come together and work together. And so I don't know whether I'm answering your question about future.
No, you have. Thinking about self-representation now and where it falls in like all of this, it's interesting to see accountants versus lawyers, but give me like a 101 class on self-representation in instances where KRA are asking me for 80K. I will probably end up paying the accountant or the lawyer close to that. It doesn't make financial sense. Let me just go it alone. A 101 class for self-representation at a tax tribunal.
So actually, so KRA has asked you for 80K. You prepare your appeal documents. On plain paper, this is my name. This is the respondent's name, which is Kenya Revenue Authority. These are the grounds of appeal. KRA is demanding 80K. These are the grounds of appeal. I don't think this is not my revenue. This was interest income, which is final tax, and so on. Those are your grounds. Then, in 2 or 3 pages, tell the story. How this? You remember I used to write compositions.
Yes.
Just tell the story. That's it. When you go to the tribunal, they will look at your story and say, I think this actually makes sense. Mr. Commissioner, why are you demanding this?
Mr. Commissioner says, according to the law, this was income that you made that was subject to tax that you did not remit. No.
Good. So now, and that's the reason why in this tribunal, the panel, they are lawyers, because the commissioner has quoted the law. You are a layman, you don't know the law.
Yeah.
So these guys will look at the law and say, actually, Mariam may not have quoted the law, but we have looked at the applicable law,
Right.
and this is our position based on having heard Mariam and the commissioner. So you actually don't even need to have quoted any law, because the business of the tribunal is to adjudicate or decide on this on merit.
Yeah.
And they're looking at the law, and they appreciate that probably as a taxpayer, I may not know the law. And if you look at the tax appeals tribunal judgments, there are numerous instances where people have not raised a legal issue, but the tribunal actually picks it up because it's in the interest of justice to address it.
Okay, that's good to know.
From experience in that tribunal, what kind of cases come to the tribunal? Is it SME, MSME cases, or is it large business cases that can end up in the tribunal? Because I can see a large business will not want to send a CEO to spend time going to sit at the tribunal all the time. So you could appoint agent, can appoint advocate, can afford. An SME, micro SME, I'm just there, I'm the one who's running business, and KRA has come and told me, you owe me 80,000 shillings. And I'm like, geez, boss, even my rent is not that much. Even my returns per month are not that much. How would I be owing you that much? Yeah? How many of those cases where KRA is actually going after a small business end up in the tribunal?
So increasingly, there are more actually, and the reason for that, so we've got all manner of cases going to the tribunal, huge, in the billions, hundreds of millions, and then you got small cases, including even individuals. So for example, I sell a property and I don't pay capital gains tax. Yes. The capital gains tax is 100 Gs. Yes. And Revenue Authority flags that transaction and they say, hey Robert, why haven't you paid this?
Yeah.
That probably goes to the dispute, and then now the tribunal will determine that. So there are all manner of cases, but I do agree with you with your point, Eric, that probably the bigger taxpayers, from a cost efficiency perspective, it does make sense for them to get representation. But having said that, you attend that tribunal, you find farmers from the village, a tea farmer from Meru somewhere is saying, these guys didn't even give me the decision. How do I even respond?
Right.
And you hear the tribunal saying, this is what you need to do. So you are giving the opportunity to be heard, because you don't want to determine this issue on a technicality. It's about final determination, which is fair to the parties.
Okay.
It's about justice. So second part to that question, are you seeing an increasing awareness of the individual and micro and small enterprises and enterprise owners of the tribunal? Like, how many people know if I disagree with KRA, I can go to the tribunal?
So when the tribunal started about 12 or so years ago, that was not so much. But today, the awareness is unbelievable. And in fact, Eric, the tribunal has outreach programs. So you see the tribunal members somewhere in a marketplace and they are telling traders, even guys who are selling under an umbrella, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to be handing out pamphlets and stuff like that. So to me, that is what we need in order to sensitize taxpayers, so that when KRA gives you an assessment or a demand, it's not the end of the world. You can actually stand up to them and say, no, can we have a conversation about this, because I don't believe this is what I owe. Okay. So there's a lot of enhanced awareness and knowledge around that, and that's the reason why there's a lot of tax disputes.
Okay, part C, right? We are going step by step. Now that we have the interest of justice and we have increased awareness, and we are seeing many small traders actually seeking this route of, I want to stand up to the KRA and tell them this is where I come from, okay? Is it then fair for KRA to come in and slap you with the action that they take? Freezing your account, which means that you can't continue trading until you go through this.
True.
Is it fair in terms of the pursuit of justice?
So no, it's not fair. And actually, Revenue Authority ought not to do that. And just to give you an example of how this tribunal works. So Mariam here has got a dispute of her 80K. She's not paid, and maybe she's late in objecting or going to the tribunal. The tribunal will say, okay, we appreciate that you're a layman, you don't know these things, so we'll give you time. Mr. Commissioner, can you please open that account and let her continue trading? And that's why I'm saying that tribunals have a very important role, because they put aside the technicalities and say, guys, let's deal with the critical issues here. The critical issue is for this business to continue, for people to continue being paid, for this business to continue making money so that they can pay taxes tomorrow.
Yes.
So,
I wish that were the approach for the entire
It is a more human-centered,
Exactly.
grounded in reality.
Exactly, grounded in reality. And so, and I can tell you as ICPAK, we've been engaging Revenue Authority. And I'll give you a very simple example. There's this whole debate about the special table, where KRA says, we've looked at your records, we think you've not been paying your taxes appropriately, and we are blocking your PIN, for example. So that used to be the case. We held meetings with the commissioner and agreed, Mr. Commissioner, you can't wake up today and say that, Robert, you've been placed on the special table. You need to give me notice, because natural justice says, notify me so that I have a right of response. And so this is my response, this is my evidence, and then the commissioner will consider it. Now, we are seeing more and more notices of intention to place people on a special table. And that really is the essence of these engagements.
Right.
Does the notice have anything? So you've given me notice, right? And the notice will be how long typically?
Typically 7 to 14 days.
All right. In 14,
only
2 weeks. In 2 weeks' time, I'm suspending your PIN. Buana.
I get, it goes back to layman. You haven't paid. In 2 weeks, you have to come up with that money, with the 80K, which for me as an SME is just a crazy amount. And then if not,
or come up with an appeal. Is it that?
So actually,
failure to that, I'm suspending your PIN.
No, well, you need to engage. This whole thing is designed to bring you to the table, and let's engage. And to your point about paying, you don't pay anything for you to appeal to the Tax Appeals Tribunal in terms of taxes. Of course, you pay a filing fee of 20,000 shillings, but that's it. You then appeal all the way to the Supreme Court if you want, without having to pay anything. That's number one. Number two, if indeed you owe this 80K, administratively, the commissioner can give you a payment plan, which is something that a lot of people don't know. I say, guys, these are my bank statements. I can only afford 3K a month. And I can tell you, I've been fortunate enough to get a 60-month payment plan from KRA. 60 months. So it's about how are you presenting your case and how you justify.
More people need to know this. Oh, we're already at time. Did you have a final? Just
information is power.
Information is power. Mercy Waruiru says, I concur with FCPA Robert. Professionals should be ready for what's coming, especially AI, which is already here. Lenny Steve says, all professions should be given much respect as they deserve. AI is a game changer in all aspects. It's not ending professions, but creating more strategic ones. So how do you compete with it? How do you integrate it to be competitive? I think that's what people don't get about AI. It's how do you infuse it? Anyway.
Sorry, this is completely off topic, but we were discussing tree planting day earlier. Game Changer KE says, looks like tree planting day is not on a specific date, as it was held in November 2023, May 2024, and October 2025.
Yeah, because last day she came here in October. So we're not Delulu.
Yeah.
Okay.
These are the holidays.
Thank you.
These are the holidays they give us impromptu. Carbon credits zikifika below 200.
Wow. Thank you very much, Robert Waruiru, for having this conversation with us. Up next, and for the next 2 hours, we discuss IVF. I think this is a very important conversation. If you or you know somebody, you're planning a family, planning to have a child of your own, it's important that you know what the different choices are, but obviously it also comes down to how accessible they are. So we'll be joined by Dr. Wanjiru Ndegwa to give us more information on IVF and fertility as well. It's coming up to 8 a.m.